Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of My Dog Will Eat My Face. The focus of this podcast is going to be on some of the things that I've honestly been going through lately and my issues of of my health and my decline, to put it mildly. And I know that's really the topic of the entire podcast, so that doesn't really help much. But let me expand on that a little bit more here for you. And basically, the effort it takes to stay happy, to stay aloft, to stay even yourself when you're facing the sort of facts that I'm facing is extremely difficult. And I wouldn't wish this upon anyone, I know. Especially in a case like mine where it's heart failure that's killing me. And it is a long, drawn out, slow, miserable death. I remember when I first started hospice, and I forget who it was, but someone on the hospice team asked me, "How would you like to die?" And, well, I've never been asked such a question as that before in my life. So I did my best to answer, and my reply was quite simple. When I want to die, I want it to go down something like, should we be flying that close to the mountain? And that's it. I want to go out in a blaze of glory, so to speak. No, not gunfire, nothing stupid like that. I just want to stop existing. An asteroid's fine, a meteor, a plane crash, even a bus hitting me. Although there's some pretty good survival rates there, I don't like. But, if I were to pick my demise, it would just be fast, clean, unexpected, and thorough. That's how I would like to go. And I don't think I'm alone with that. I really don't. I think there's a lot of people that would like that if they had a choice in the matter. That's not what they meant in their question, by the way. They were asking more along the lines of, would I prefer to die at home versus die in a hospital? So that's a nice, cheery, happy topic. But anyway, be that as it may, I do find it extremely difficult to just stay myself, to stay aloft, and to stay how I am as a person, with an optimistic outlook and a feeling that things can get better as time goes on. No matter how crummy they are now, I can always look to the future and say, hey, there's a good chance, though, that things will improve. And that's just not the case. That's not going to happen. I almost said that's just not to happen. Know me speak English good. But in all seriousness, that's just not the way it's going to happen. That's not the way this sort of thing works. My biggest fights by far are things I've covered before. The fight against isolation. And the fight to stay happy. And finally, I've brought this up, but only briefly, but the I wouldn't say fight, but the openness to ask for help and the ability to ask for help when needed is another area of significant struggle that I face. I think those three areas are my greatest bane in my life, day to day. And frankly, it gets more difficult with each passing day as I get more bad news from the doctors, as the nurses continue to come and go and share with me their findings, which are rarely ever optimistic. And it becomes very difficult to not be isolated and to not be unhappy, or that is, it's at least more difficult than ever to find happiness as it once was in my life. And I've been such an independent SOB, for lack of a better word. Actually, no, that's probably a perfect way to describe me in my past. An independent SOB. I'm fine with that. That works. I have no qualms with that. That's generally who I've always been. And to come down to terms with being somebody who has to ask for help is the third extremely difficult thing that I have to face on a day-to-day basis. So in this podcast, I'm just going to focus on those three little things. Little. But I really want to focus on why is it so hard to fight things like isolation and to find happiness and to find the courage to ask for help, at least in my case. So, that's today's topic, and I thank you for joining me today, and without further ado, I'll get started here quite shortly. So, needless to say, I've had to work pretty hard at fighting isolation. And that is a very peculiar fight that I've had to endure. It's taken a lot of forceful reaching out to others for companionship. And these are with people that I have not seen in maybe months or years even. And that makes it very difficult. These are old friends of mine who, through no fault of their own, are now distant from me, because I myself have been distant as I've struggled with this illness on my own, in my own isolation. And that's the difficulty I face when trying to reach out to others for companionship. It's certainly problematic for me because whereas before I could say, hey, do you want to visit? And maybe do some pre-partying, maybe do some drinks before we go out to the club, or meet up here before we go to that new restaurant, or something else that's not dissimilar from those two simple examples. But now, because I am so restricted, restricted to 18 liters of oxygen, supplemental oxygen at home, that I am incapable of leaving my apartment. And that, in and of itself, is extremely difficult for me to even ask for a friend to say, just visit. It sounds nice, but to be blunt, it sounds too much like a hospital visit. So I try to mix it with things that I know I can do. We can still get food here. We can get it delivered. We can get takeout. We could still have drinks here. We could still watch a movie here. We could still geek off here and play video games or something that's not too dissimilar. And that does help for me to overcome my fear of inviting people over just to be with me. But one of my biggest fears is not remedied, and I don't see how it can be except within my own head, because it's an issue that comes only from within my own head. My problem is that I am no longer the man that I used to be. And you'll have to excuse me as I explain this issue. There might be some temporary audio issues to where I have to pause. So just bear with me if that happens. But it's extremely hard for me to consider the fact that no matter which way I slice it, I'm not inviting my friends over to go out. It's not a pre-party. It's not to go to my favorite restaurant. Because these are things, although my favorite, I can never ever do. Ever again. And so that's pretty hard on me. I'm no longer the man that I see myself to be. When I look in the mirror, I no longer see myself. And that's a problem to try to reach out to people for companionship. So that's where I really struggle with reaching out to get assistance and to get friends to just swing by. And frankly, a lot of friends have a hard time saying yes. Because let's face it, when I made these friends, they were fun friends. We're talking 20 plus years ago in a lot of cases. I tend to keep old friends. So these are folks that I've befriended since I was in my 20s. The goal is always to go out to the new club, to go out to the new restaurant. Sometimes, when I'm lucky, to even travel, to go see our favorite comedian. And now these are things that I just can't do. And I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time recognizing my own self. So with that, I struggle immensely to find companionship when I myself don't even know who the hell I am to ask. So that in itself is the first thing I have to overcome. The second thing is honestly time. Believe it or not, being disabled in hospice care keeps you pretty busy. It's absurd. I deal constantly with insurance, hospice. I mean, my care team's almost half a dozen people that come and go every week. I deal with my disability. I have to solve major issues that come up at least once a week, like, for example, a medication issue. And so with that being said, I really struggle with how and when can I actively seek happiness. And I'll digress a little bit, because I know at least I'm better off than others. Because I know someone who hasn't been able to find happiness for decades. He's an associate, I'll say, definitely not a friend, who has been addicted to painkillers for decades. He's been trying to get clean for years and years. And he just unfortunately hasn't. And on top of that, he constantly complains to me, amongst others, I'm sure, about his minor pains and aches, as though I would just not understand how bad he has it. And he says it in a tone precisely like that, as though he's in some sort of disability Olympics, and I couldn't possibly understand how terrible he has it. There are times where I just want to shake him and frankly just scream at him and say, "You do know that I'm on home hospice, right? You do know that I'm in tremendous pain, right? And anything you could possibly dream up in that cute little head of yours to complain about your situation, to me it's going to sound like a toddler complaining about a boo-boo. And I just can't help it because you do nothing but complain about that and seek painkillers for that." So needless to say, this is someone who I would call a parasitic personality. Every time I kick this person out of my life, it's blissful. I have some chance to find happiness in my life. Whenever this person is in my life, it's agony. It's filled with angst. I don't think that's a mistake. So, for myself, and I think for others who might be listening, you got to think of those people that match that criteria. We all know someone like this, I think. I think everyone listening just thought of someone. Or you probably just thought of another. And, just thought of another too, I bet. And it's these toxic personalities that just got to get out of our lives to seek happiness for ourselves. They are just simply parasitic people. And I'm sorry, but they have to be removed. Otherwise, I am going to die way too young. And I'm going to die way too young, miserable. Not to say my dying has anything to do with them, but the misery does. And I don't want that. So I found it, at least within myself, to really try to be removed from such individuals in my life. And I think that's one lesson anyone could carry forward. But that is just one teeny little area that I can use to overcome my issues with trying to find happiness and trying to invite people over to fight my isolation. Because fighting the isolation is by far the first step, I think, for me to finding happiness. I cannot feel like I'm completely absorbed, or I'm completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Bereft of companionship in my life. Especially since my dog passed. That was catastrophic. For this reason, amongst others. I don't have a replacement. I can't possibly think of one. So for me, the isolation and overcoming it is by far still one of the hardest things I have in my life. I found ways to get through it though. It's not all doom and gloom. I have invited friends over to watch a movie with me. I do order food in for us and have a meal here with a friend, just not at the restaurant. It's nowhere near as good because I used to love the experience of the restaurant. But it's something. It's better. It's not great. It's better. And better is better. So I definitely make efforts and definitely do things to overcome this. To try to get this isolation at bay. But it's a constant battle. It's daily. And I wish I had a better plan to overcome it, but at this point, I just simply don't. Because already what I'm doing is taking some severe, bold effort on my part. It's removing those people from my life who I don't want in my life because they're parasites. It's the bold effort to reach out to people, to do things that I've never done before. It's to do it around the crazy schedule of hospice. Plus, not to mention my own medical catastrophes that come and go. It's not uncommon for me to plan something with someone and oops, the day arrives and medically I am just unable to do it. So, those are the things that I'm trying to overcome to get over my isolation. And if anyone has any other ideas, I am all ears. I am all ears. My biggest issue right now is being tethered to that oxygen. And the tanks I have are 2 liters too shy. So even with the best emergency tanks, they flow at only 15 liters, which puts me at a 2 liter per second deficit. Which means as soon as I leave my apartment on an E-tank, I start asphyxiating from lack of oxygen immediately. So, there's the problem I have with that. Knowing full well that isolation is not the whole sum of happiness. But I figured I would start there. Now, to gain more happiness, it's kind of like going blind into the dark, not knowing the real outcome, trying solutions and willing to fail. Happiness may be right in front of you, but you can't see it. That's something I've learned, at least in my short excursion in my search for happiness. I've reached out to friends, some of whom I haven't seen in years, trying to rekindle those friendships, as I've previously stated. But not just because of the pain or suffering or something negative that I'm experiencing. That's no way to start a friendship. If a friend of mine tried to start things up with that, I would probably be pretty well turned off myself. But because I want to pursue happiness, and that's the real goal, and I want to do it with them, then I'm doing this with the right intentions. It's not with pity or sympathy, but rather with camaraderie and understanding. And through that, I thankfully reawoken some friendships. And frankly, yes, not so much some others, but at least I woke some. And they just happened to be sitting right under my nose. So that's an example of happiness that you could pursue that might be right in front of you, and you're just not paying attention to it. Other happiness, though, I do admit it's like going into the dark and hoping you find something worthwhile. It's experimenting a lot. It's trying new things. It's deviating from your old comfort zone. And that's a very hard thing to do. In my case, I was made very happy through certain things, only a few things. And now it takes sort of a buckshot of multiple little things that achieve some sort of semblance of happiness. But that's honestly just the best I can do. It sounds silly, but I've done things like try new video games, because I've always liked video games. I've tried reading new books, because I've always liked reading. I've tried different foods even though I can only have them at home, it's still a little bit of an adventure to have something totally new at the house. And honestly, that has been really successful because I've always been a foodie. So I've really latched onto that part of my personality and pushed it and moved forward with that and try to find happiness and seek happiness with it. Now, what that means for anyone else, it could be any number of things, but I think the fundamental similarities is just that which I've already addressed, which is you just don't know how it's going to turn out. It is a stumble into the dark. You do have to try things that you've never tried before, you know, before anyone takes that as a go ahead to go out and try, some lines of fentanyl or some pills of fentanyl and, I don't know, killing a drifter or something because I've never done that before. That's probably a bad idea. let's keep let's keep never doing those things, okay? Some things are better never attempted. But yet, there are so many things out there that we haven't tried. I know one guy that's not in a too far distant situation for me, but he's tried to learn new musical instruments actually to help him pass the days. He's actually successfully had a tutor come to his home, and that's worked out for him. So you just never know. And it's just taking that risk and that bold step, knowing full well that you could probably, and you very will, on some circumstances, completely flop it and not appreciate what you tried. You won't like it and it will completely suck. But there are other times where, well, you might like it just a little bit, and it might bring you just a little bit of happiness to get you somewhat through that day. And that's honestly all I can do in this meantime is just reach out to those teeny little bits of happiness, those little accomplishments as well. Like, for example, I mentioned how busy things get when you're in hospice, dealing with insurance and the hospice team and all kinds of things. Well, when I have a good day with that, so to speak, then, if I actually get something done, if I actually make a major change to a policy, or I get the policy I want, or I get the result that I want, and if I get the outcome I want in my discussions with whoever it might be, the insurance company, or if I get the medication situation resolved, I take that as a huge victory lap. Before in my career, that would have been nothing. But now, I'll take what I can get. It's not much, but I'll take it. And I think that's key. You gotta always remember that better is better. It's not gonna be great, but better is always better. And just keep that in mind. And that you can always strive to make things better, even if the options themselves seem absurd and seem silly. At least that's what I've done, and so far so good. And I've not had to take any fentanyl nor kill any drifters in the process. So far. And finally, third, another area where I struggle with is asking for help. I know I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I've definitely got the history of being a very stubborn, independent something that would just be bleeped out by my application anyway. So I definitely have that history, and that's something I can't erase. I've always been very stubborn and very independent and very reluctant to ask for assistance with honestly anything in my life. And that's something that's very hard to overcome, but it's something I'm going to have to overcome to continue to live. That's just all there is to it. And I think this final piece kind of underscores the gravitas of the importance of doing these things. Even though they sound kind of fun, maybe, or they deal with things that you don't necessarily have to quote unquote worry about, because happiness and doing things and getting good food and things of that nature are not requisites to life. But I beg to differ. And I also like to end on this point because this really underscores the gravitas of this. That if I don't ask for help, if I don't basically man up and ask for the help that I need when I need it, I could very well die. And so that's something I have to overcome whether I want to or not. And saying, well, I've always been independent, you have to let me be, blah, 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 blah. It just isn't going to fly. It just won't work whatsoever. The fact of the matter is that the ability to request help for a situation like the one that I'm in is just completely unavoidable in so many ways. It goes for peers and friends, it goes for family, and it even goes, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know where you stand on things, but it also goes with your relationship with the government. When you're dealing with things such as what I'm dealing with, you are actually entitled to certain rights. And there's no shame in asking for those rights. There's no shame in asking for that government assistance. It's something that I have learned. And it's something that I hope people understand, that it's okay to be it's okay to ask for that sort of assistance because of your position. It's not a lifestyle to which you've driven yourself towards. It's not something perhaps that, at least in my case, it's not. And I guess I should only talk about myself, so I apologize for that. So in my case, it's not a lifestyle I've driven myself towards. It's not a situation I enjoy. It's not something that I look forward to every day and every night. It's nothing like that whatsoever. On the contrary, I feel a great burden in my heart when I do have to ask for assistance. But I don't have a choice. Well, I do have a choice, I guess. I could either do this or I could just suffer a whole lot more and make my life so much more worse. And that's not fair to me or my loved ones or my friends, and I'm just not going to do that. There's a word for that. That's called being a jerk, and I'm not going to do that. I'll be a jerk in other ways. Don't worry, I've got plenty of ways to be a jerk. But this way, to not ask for assistance when I need it, I'm striving really hard to make sure that that is not the way in which I perform that function. And I'm still learning a lot with that. And coming to the acceptance of it, and coming to live with it, and realize it's either this way or a much more difficult way that's not going to only hurt you but others you care about, is absolutely a way to protect your happiness and your well-being when you're fighting your own demise and your own decline. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Maybe someone out there can talk me out of it. I doubt it. I'd be willing to listen. But to me, in order to achieve happiness, in order to get even just a little bit of happiness, you're going to have to eat a lot of humble pie and accept it and realize it's just the way it is. So as I come to the ending of this podcast, I look back at the 3 items that I've analyzed heretofore, and I can logically pick apart sort of some way, I hope, to achieve some degree of happiness. It does greatly disappoint me that the truth of the matter is it hasn't worked as well so far in my life as I would otherwise hope. But I think that's because maybe my expectations are unrealistic. I don't think I can ever again expect to honestly answer the question if I'm happy with an honest yes. The facts just don't support that. I am dying. I am physically getting worse, and the doctors have assured me of that. And then on top of the physical decline, I just happened to face tremendous loss twice in a row while in hospice, of losing both my mother and my best friend. And then on top of that is the unyielding sort of isolation that takes really a constant battle to try to overcome. So if anyone were to ask me today, am I happy? The answer is no, of course not. Why would I be happy? I would think I'd have to be belligerently insane to be happy at this point with my life. But I'm happy with where my life has been, and that matters for a lot. And I still have fleeting moments of happiness. And it seems that that's the best I can achieve with these 3 things that I've analyzed. The best I can achieve are going to be little spots here and there where I can maybe be happy for a moment. If I'm lucky, 2 moments. But maybe that's all what any of us truly gets. I do know that this is indeed my first attempt at life, and it being my first attempt, it's going to have probably my lousiest outcome. So, I think that's true for all of us. That's somewhat comforting to know that we're all in the same boat. This is all our first attempt. And all first attempts, well, not all, but for the most part, first attempts are going to be your worst go at it. So as I come to the end and the conclusion here, I really have to look at those fleeting moments. Going forward, at least, because that's all I think I'm going to get. But my big fear is what's going to happen when they become less and less and less. I just don't know. And I think I could have answered differently if I didn't face those two major losses on top of everything else. I guess it's just bad luck. And again, all I've got left are fading moments. But, truth being told, coming on here and delivering a podcast and sharing my thoughts, my feelings, and my memories does help. It does somehow buck me up. I do appreciate you listeners taking the time out of your day to listen to the silly things I might have to say and share. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I do appreciate it very much, because it truly does buck me up at the end of the day. So, to all of you that are listening, I say thank you again so much for your time. And if you want to support the channel even further, if you want to make sure you go to heaven, go to patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface. Actually, I don't sell indulgences there, but I think I just came up with a really good idea to start doing that. Okay. Look out for indulgences to be sold at patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface. And you will be guaranteed a path to heaven. In all seriousness, I would appreciate the support. Doing this takes a lot out of my time and a lot of my energy, which is also fleeting and in limited supply. So even to me, it's not free, and so I'd appreciate the support. But the biggest support I can get is something you've already done, which is listen to this podcast. And again, I truly mean it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really do appreciate it. And with that said, I hope to talk to you next week. And ciao for now.